It is said that in a valley where no road bends, no caravan passes, and no village dares to settle, there stands a single arch of stone, weathered, cracked, yet still upright against the long breath of centuries. It waits. No path leads to it. No map marks its presence. It rises from the earth like a sentinel, watching over silence itself. Some call it a gate, though it leads to nothing. Others whisper that it is the last trace of a kingdom erased not only from memory, but from time. At twilight, when the valley is filled with the hush of cooling winds, the stones seem to breathe. The air threads itself through the carved cracks, producing a low murmur, like a voice caught between language and sigh. Travelers who once wandered close to it spoke of these sounds, not as noise, but as whispers, as though the stones themselves remembered the hands that shaped them. The gate is carved with fading symbols, spirals, crescents, and lines that twist as though they were once rivers of meaning. No scholar has named them. No scripture recalls their shape. Some resemble the pattern of constellations, others the coils of serpents, others still the branching of unseen roots. They are marks that resist translation, as if they were written for no human tongue. The silence of the valley seems to deepen as one looks closer, as though the gate itself asks the watcher to listen without words. It is here, in this emptiness, that questions rise. Was this the entrance to a vanished city? Did towers once stretch beyond it, their shadows marking dawn and dusk? Or was it nothing more than a marker? A stone threshold set down by wanderers who measured time differently, who counted years not in calendars, but in echoes. Whispers tell us that those who approached in the night heard voices carried through the arch, even when no figure stood there. Some said the sounds were like the chanting of monks. Others said it was the laughter of children long forgotten. A few even claimed to hear their own names breathed back to them, soft as dust. It was never the same voice twice. The arch spoke only in fragments like memory itself. Beneath the silence, the valley holds traces of what might once have been. Faint outlines in the earth where foundations may have rested. Shards of pottery smoothed by sand. Fragments of stone that do not belong to the gate but seem drawn toward it, as if broken walls once leaned against its form. Yet there is no certainty. Perhaps these are accidents of wind and time. Or perhaps the city slipped away, not destroyed, not abandoned, but erased, as though history itself decided to fold its page closed. Some believe the gate marks a threshold not of stone, but of time. To pass through it, they say, was to step into another rhythm of the world. Not forward, not backward, but sideways into centuries that exist beside our own. There are tales of shepherds who vanished near its shadow, never to return, though their flocks remained. Of wanderers who crossed through, only to emerge elsewhere, changed by years though only moments had passed. Of children who stepped into the arch and came back with eyes filled with starlight, speaking words no one could understand. Is this memory or myth? Perhaps both. Perhaps memory itself is a kind of myth told to keep the silence company. The atmosphere of the gate is not one of menace, but of waiting. Its stillness feels patient, as though time itself leans against it, refusing to move. Even the wind, so restless elsewhere in the valley, slows when it passes between the stones, curling into a softer breath. Birds avoid nesting near it. Grass does not grow at its base. It is neither ruin nor monument. It is a question carved in stone. In forgotten corners of old manuscripts, faint references appear. A monk in the 12th century wrote of a valve of stone, beyond which lies silence. A traveler in the 14th century noted a great arch that led nowhere, where stars seemed brighter through its frame. Later, these writings were dismissed as fables, yet their voices echo one another across centuries. Always the same description: a gate with no road, a silence with weight. Some scholars argued it was once part of a larger fortress, toppled by earthquakes and left behind. Others said it marked the entrance to a burial site, the rest buried beneath the valley floor. Yet excavations revealed nothing but rock and dust. No bones, no treasures, no chambers, just silence stretching deeper than shovels could reach. Still, pilgrims came, not in crowds, but alone, in secret, seeking something they could not name. They would sit before the gate at night, watching the moonlight trace its curve, listening for the voices carried on the wind. Some left offerings, small bowls of grain, carved figurines, folded scraps of paper with words they hoped the silence might keep. Others simply touched the stone, letting its chill sink into their palms, as though time itself flowed beneath its surface. The gate does not answer, and never opens. Yet those who leave often speak of dreams that follow them, nights filled with strange landscapes, cities of glass dust, oceans with no horizon, stairways that climbed into stars, dreams that feel older than themselves. And so the gate waits. It has waited longer than any empire, longer than memory itself. No wars have claimed it, no faith has destroyed it. It is neither worshipped nor ignored, but endures, caught between presence and absence. It is the pause between breaths, the silence between heartbeats, the threshold between what is known and what is only imagined. Some voices say it is a warning, others, an invitation. Some believe it was never meant to be crossed at all, but only to remind us that there are places time will not enter. As dusk deepens into night, the valley grows darker, shadows lengthening around the gate. The last light of the sun frames it in gold for a moment, then fades, leaving only the curve of stone against stars. In that moment, it seems less like an object, more like a memory. Fragile, incomplete, shimmering just beyond reach. Perhaps it was once an entrance. Perhaps it was once a marker. Perhaps it is neither, and only silence given shape. The truth is as fragile as dust, and as enduring as stone. And so, in the hush of night, the gate remains, untouched, unopened, unbroken, waiting as it always has, waiting for nothing, waiting for everything, waiting in silence heavier than any answer. It is said that in the hollow of a forgotten hill, beneath stone that has lost its strength, there rests a chamber where silence has thickened into weight. The place was once a library, though no shelves stand upright now, no voices move through its corridors. All that remains is ash, ash upon marble floors, ash clinging to pillars cracked and leaning, ash in which time itself seems to have dissolved. Beneath the silence, fragments still linger, like breaths caught before fading away. At the heart of the ruin lies one piece, a single fragment of parchment, curled at its edges, its skin blackened where fire kissed it centuries ago. The words upon it are blurred, letters softened by smoke and years, yet faint traces remain. Ink, almost invisible, still clings to the fibers like memory that refuses to surrender. To look at it is to feel that something once lived upon it, some thought, some story, still breathing faintly in its dust. The image is haunting, a page that survived when walls did not, when shelves collapsed, when ceilings fell inward, and even when the hands that wrote it returned to soil. The scroll should have vanished with everything else, but it remains, as if silence itself has chosen to keep it. Whispers tell us that this library was once a chamber of fire and light. Marble walls reflected the glow of torches, and scribes bent over long tables where parchment and reed pens moved in careful rhythm. It was not a library for the common eye. These were no ordinary words. The texts held here were meant for kings, for priests, for the few who believed themselves guardians of knowledge too heavy for the world. It is said that some of the scrolls contained maps of stars, traced with such precision that they rivaled the heavens themselves. Others spoke of rituals too sacred for open temples, hymns whispered only under the moon. There were records of civilizations that had already slipped into dust, chronicles of gods dethroned by rising faiths, and prophecies written in language so veiled that even their authors seemed to fade behind them. The silence of the ruin carries their absence. One can almost hear the faint scratch of quills, the murmur of voices debating truths not meant to leave the chamber. In the flicker of imagination, torches flare again, casting shadows of monks against polished walls. The scent of ink and wax fills the air, the hush of concentration broken only by the turning of parchment. And then, as quickly, the vision collapses, swallowed again by ash. What happened here? Some say it was fire, rising sudden and merciless, devouring shelves, swallowing words faster than they could be saved. Some say it was no accident but a deliberate act, torches brought in to burn forbidden knowledge before it could spread. Others whisper that silence itself descended upon the place, that time decided it had heard enough and sealed the chamber with dust. The fragment of parchment tells us little. Its letters are faint as the breath of the dying, but there is a rhythm in the lines, curves that suggest poetry or hymn. Some see constellations hidden in the pattern. Some imagine instructions veiled as metaphor. The truth is blurred, as though the words themselves have chosen to veil their meaning, even as they survive. It is here, in the presence of what cannot be read, that the wonder deepens. For knowledge erased is not the same as knowledge lost. Something remains, an echo, a shadow, a whisper carried by silence. And so the listener is guided deeper, into the quiet, into the dust, into the breath of memory. Imagine the scribes who once bent over this very page, their faces lit by flame, their hands steady, their eyes heavy with knowing. What thoughts moved through them as they wrote? Did they believe they were preserving truth or hiding it? Did they imagine that centuries later, only a single fragment would survive, trembling on the edge of nothing? Some scholars, wandering into ruins like these, speak of words that refuse to die. They say parchment carries not only ink, but intention, that the breath of the scribe lingers in the fibers, and that those who touch it may feel the faintest hum of voices long gone. Perhaps it is imagination, perhaps it is memory's final trick. Yet in the silence of the ruined library, where ash muffles every sound, the possibility feels as real as stone. Beyond the fragment, beneath the rubble, lie shapes that once were scrolls. Rolled, stacked, sealed, now collapsed into dust. Their secrets gone, or perhaps only hidden deeper, pressed into layers too fragile to uncover. Each pile of ash might have been a hymn to a vanished god. Each crumble of charcoal might have been a record of stars. Each broken line might have been the story of a city erased from every other record. And now they are all silence. The listener is invited to dwell not in what is known, but in what is not. To breathe with the ash, to sit within the dust, to imagine words that can no longer be read but still exist in their absence. For silence itself is a kind of text, one that speaks through what it withholds. Some voices say that the scrolls were burned by kings who feared their content, that they revealed origins of power too fragile to endure, that they spoke of heavens ordered differently, of timelines stretched into contradiction, that they told of worlds before worlds, ages before ages. If such words once lived, they are gone now, veiled by ash, but even in their silence, they whisper. And so the story returns to the single fragment. Blackened edges, blurred ink, faint as a dying star. It is said that if you trace the letters with your finger, they pulse not in light but in memory, as though the scroll remembers being read and longs to be read again. Yet no one can fully decipher it. Speaks in half-words, half-shapes, half-breaths. It is knowledge suspended between presence and absence. The silence of the library is not empty. It is full, heavy, breathing. It carries centuries of voices, prayers, secrets, and songs. It carries the weight of knowing and the grace of forgetting. It is a silence that waits, not to be broken, but to be felt. As the story fades, the parchment curls back into itself, its ink retreating further into shadow. The shelves of ash close in, dust thickens, and the chamber dissolves again into silence. The listener is left not with answers, but with the quiet weight of the unknown, the sense of holding something fragile, precious, and unfinished. Perhaps the scrolls were never meant to be found. Perhaps their survival was not accident, but ritual. Perhaps some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so the chapter closes, not with revelation, but with silence. Ash drifts across stone. Shadows settle. The scroll breathes once, then rests. The library sleeps again. It is said that beneath the silver weight of moonlit waves, there rests a city swallowed whole. Columns that once reached skyward now lean against the slow embrace of tides. Streets where footsteps echoed are veiled in sand, their patterns traced only by drifting currents. Carved altars lie open to the sea, cradling not prayers but seaweed, not hymns but the hush of water. What once belonged to light now breathes in silence, a silence so vast it feels sacred. The story begins with an image. Divers descending into darkness, their lanterns trembling in the water like fragile stars. Through the veil of shifting currents, shapes begin to emerge, the outline of a staircase, the curve of an arch, the broken gaze of statues long forgotten. Their stone faces tilt upward, toward the shimmer of light they will never touch again. It is as if the city still waits, dreaming beneath the ocean's endless breath. Legends tell us that once, bells rang from its towers. Their sound carried across the shore, calling voices to prayer, to gathering, to ritual. At dusk, when the sun melted into the horizon, the bells would echo like a hymn written upon the waves. But one night, the echoes ceased. Storm clouds gathered, lightning fractured the horizon, and the ocean rose with a will of its own. Some say the gods demanded silence. Others say the city's pride summoned the storm. Whatever truth hides beneath the surface, the bells have not been heard since. Now only the sea remembers. The ocean is not a keeper of details. It blurs, it softens, it erases, and yet it holds. Each stone rests in its own stillness. Each pillar leans as if in prayer. Each broken street whispers of footsteps that once were. The sea does not forget. It simply keeps memory in another language. A language of currents, of salt, of silence. Whispers tell of storms that came without warning. On the eve of festivals, when fires burned on the altars, the waves rose higher than walls, sweeping through the streets as though the city had been called home to the ocean from which it once rose. Some believe the priests had angered unseen powers. Some believe a covenant had been broken. Others say it was nothing more than the shifting of the earth, the trembling of the seafloor. Yet none can explain why the city sank so completely, leaving no trace on land, no ruin above water, nothing but a memory drowned in depth. The divers who visit speak of temples aligned with the stars, though now the stars they sought are hidden by water. They tell of mosaics that still cling faintly to stone, patterns of spirals and suns, their colors muted but not erased. They describe statues of gods with arms outstretched, their gestures frozen in the current as if still blessing, still warning. Some divers claim to hear faint sounds when they move through the ruins, echoes like distant bells, or whispers carried by shifting sand. The deeper they go, the more the sea seems to hum, as though it remembers what we have forgotten. It is said that those who built the city carved it in reflection of the heavens. Each street mirrored a constellation, each tower marked by the moon. Some scholars wonder if its sinking was not accident but design, a return to the depths, a ritual of vanishing. Others dismiss these thoughts as myth, yet the ocean itself seems to resist dismissal. For whenever eyes fall upon the ruins, wonder follows. Beneath the silence, each stone holds an untold memory. Each pillar is a hymn drowned in water. Imagine the families that once walked here. Mothers carrying vessels of water, children tracing patterns in dust, priests lifting voices in sacred chant. Imagine the voices, the laughter, the cries, the prayers. Now imagine them all at once, silenced in a single night. What remains is the echo, not loud, not clear, but soft, steady, woven into the rhythm of waves. The ocean is a patient archivist. Where fire consumes, water preserves. Wood dissolves, but stone endures. Scrolls vanish, but carvings remain. And so the sea holds the city like a reliquary, keeping its memory alive in veils of blue. Yet it offers no answers, only fragments, glimpses, questions suspended in the quiet weight of salt. Some believe the city's fall was punishment. Others say it was mercy, that its people were taken to another realm, spared from a fate yet to come. There are even those who whisper that the city never sank at all, that what divers see are illusions, reflections of a place that still stands elsewhere, hidden beyond our reach. Perhaps the ruins are only a shadow, a memory projected by the sea itself. But whether truth or myth, the silence remains the same. When one floats above the ruins, suspended between surface and depth, there is a feeling unlike any other. The sea presses gently against the body, holding, cradling. The ruins loom below, vast and unreachable. The sky waits above, distant and shimmering. In that space between two infinities, time feels different.
Moment stretch.
Memory blurs. Wonder deepens. It is said that the city once had a sacred chamber where voices gathered to speak to the gods. Now that chamber lies open to the ocean. Fish weave through its pillars. Coral grows where incense once burned. The gods themselves, if they are still there, listen only in silence. Yet perhaps the silence is the answer. Perhaps the city was never meant to be remembered in clarity, only in mystery. And so the ocean keeps it, as it keeps shipwrecks, bones, and stars reflected on its surface. The city is not gone. It is simply veiled, hidden in a depth where words dissolve, where sound slows, where memory breathes differently. To listen for it is to listen for silence. To look for it is to gaze into shadow. To seek it is to accept that some truths are meant to rest beneath the tide. As night deepens, the moonlight scatters across the waves. Each shimmer is like a fragment of the city rising to the surface, then fading again. The listener is left floating, suspended in the same space as the divers, between surface and depth, between knowing and unknowing, between presence and absence. Perhaps the city was never meant to be found. Perhaps it chose the ocean as its final temple. Perhaps its bells still ring, but only in the language of tides, a language we cannot yet hear. And so the story closes with the hush of waves. Columns remain, statues tilt upward, streets lie still, the ocean holds its silence. The city sleeps in water, and we drift with it, listening not for answers, but for echoes the sea alone has kept. It is said that in the heart of an old monastery, where stone corridors echo with the breath of centuries, there rests a map. It is not displayed, nor read by scholars, nor carried by travelers. It lies folded in a vault, its animal skin surface worn soft by time, its ink fading like memory at dawn. When the vault is opened, which is rare, the air is heavy, as though silence itself has grown thick around it. The map is unlike others. Its lines do not move like rivers, following the natural flow of earth. They curve like thoughts, bend like recollections, drift like dreams. They wander into places that no later map dares to name. Mountains rise upon its surface, peaks drawn where no traveler has walked. Valleys sink into its parchment that no history recalls. It is less geography than memory, less record than echo. Imagine, for a moment, the hand that traced it. A monk, seated by candlelight, scratching faintly across stretched hide. Each stroke deliberate, yet uncertain. Each line a gesture not of certainty, but of suggestion. The sound of ink moving across the skin was said to be like a soft chant, as though the map itself was being sung into existence. Did the monk copy what he had seen, or what he had been told? Or was he tracing visions, images that rose like smoke in the silence of prayer? Whispers tell us that the map leads not to places, but to shadows. Cities that were never built, yet remembered. Deserts with no horizon, drawn as spirals that fade into themselves. A chamber marked with care where, today, only forest stands. Some believe the monk recorded a world that once was erased by time but not entirely gone. Others say it was prophecy, a vision of what might come, though never did. Still others believe it was not meant to guide feet at all, but to stir the mind into wonder. Beneath the silence of the vault, the parchment seems alive. When moonlight filters through the high windows and touches its surface, the ink glimmers faintly, as though breathing. Some who have seen it swear the lines shift, bending in new directions, forming new shapes. A mountain disappears, a river fades, a city rises. The map does not settle. It wanders like thought itself. Travelers once attempted to follow its paths. Centuries ago, kings sent expeditions into the places it promised. They climbed mountains that had no name. They wandered valleys no one had charted. They returned empty-handed, with stories of deserts that ended in mist, forests that seemed to whisper, rivers that flowed into silence. Some never returned at all. And yet the map remained, waiting, as if the journeys mattered less than the act of seeking. In forgotten corners of manuscripts, faint references appear. A bishop in the 13th century wrote of a skin marked with illusions of land, where faith faltered and shadows grew. A cartographer in the 16th century described a map that leads only to uncertainty, yet compels the eye to follow. Always, the tone is the same, reverence mixed with unease. The map is not dismissed as false, but feared as too true, too dangerous, too uncertain. And so it was locked away. The monks folded it carefully, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in the vault where light seldom falls. Yet even folded, it seems to whisper. Those who have held it say they feel warmth beneath their fingers, as though the skin remembers the breath of its maker. Some dream afterward, dreams of long roads winding into valleys that never existed, of towers gleaming on horizons no eye has seen. The dreams linger, like the ink, refusing to fade. What is a map if not a promise? A drawing that says, here is a path, follow it and you will arrive. But this map promises nothing. Its paths wander into silence. Its destinations dissolve. It leads not outward, but inward. Not to land, but to shadow. Perhaps that is why it has endured, not because it guides, but because it unsettles. Some voices say it was drawn to protect, that the monks marked places that should not be found. Temples veiled in mountains, chambers where forbidden scrolls were sealed, cities that had angered the heavens. By bending the lines, by drawing rivers where none flowed, they misled the eye, guarding truths too fragile to endure daylight. Others whisper it was meant to reveal, not conceal, that those who truly understood its curves would find their way, not by walking, but by listening, by entering silence as one enters a forest, with humility, with patience, with wonder. The listener is invited to imagine, a traveler holding the map beneath starlight, the parchment unfolding in the night air, its surface trembling as though alive, each line shining faintly, beckoning. The traveler sets out, guided not by compass or star, but by faith in the lines themselves. Days pass, landscapes shift. The road does not end, but neither does it arrive. Perhaps the journey itself was the destination. Perhaps the map was never meant to be followed, only carried. In the quiet of the monastery vault, the map rests once more. Its edges curled, its ink faded, its silence intact. To look upon it is to feel suspended between worlds. The world we know, mapped and measured, and the world that waits in shadow, veiled, uncertain, unfinished. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was drawn only to remind us that not all paths lead to places. Some lead only into silence. Some lead only into dream. And so the chapter closes with the sound of the monk's quill still faintly scratching in memory. The parchment folds itself into darkness. The vault returns to silence. The map waits, not to be read, not to be followed, but to be remembered in wonder. It is said that high in a mountain pass, where the air thins and silence deepens, there rests a temple carved directly into the stone. No roof shelters it. No ceiling conceals its chambers. It is open to the heavens, as though the builders wished not to hide from the sky, but to invite it inside. To stand within its walls is to feel both small and infinite, both grounded in earth and lifted toward the stars. The story begins at dusk. Shadows stretch across the cliffs, lengthening like the arms of forgotten giants. The last gold of the sun fades, and the mountain air cools, carrying with it a hush that feels almost sacred. One by one, stars emerge, first faint, then brighter, then countless, scattered like silver dust across the darkening sky. The temple waits in silence, its walls breathing with the rhythm of stone, its open roof framing the heavens as if the sky itself were its ceiling. Long ago, priests gathered here when the night deepened. They raised their eyes not toward an altar of earth, but to the vast cathedral of stars. It is said they aligned their rituals with constellations, timing their chants with the slow drift of light across the firmament. Words were whispered, prayers shaped like breath, vanishing into the night. Perhaps they believed the stars could hear. Perhaps they knew that silence itself was the only response. Within the temple, chambers open like mirrors. Smooth walls reflect moonlight, doubling its glow, softening its edge. Altars carved into the rock are bathed in silver, their surfaces cold yet luminous. One can imagine priests placing offerings upon them, bowls of water to reflect the sky, stones marked with spirals to mirror the paths of stars. The temple was not for the living alone. It was a dialogue between earth and heaven, between silence and echo. Whispers tell us that each chamber was built to align with a different constellation. One opened toward Orion, another toward the Pleiades, another still toward the North Star, fixed and eternal. The builders seemed to believe that the movements of the sky carried messages, that the stars spoke a language not of words, but of light. They carved the temple to listen. What secrets did they read in the sky? Did they see prophecies in the shifting constellations? Did they trace the spirals of galaxies in their imagination, long before telescopes could reveal them? Did they believe the stars held the memory of those who had passed, voices marked by the moon, watching from beyond? We cannot know. The whispers have dissolved. The rituals have faded. Only the temple remains, waiting in silence, its gaze fixed upward. Some scholars suggest that the temple was an observatory, a place where ancient astronomers tracked the seasons, measured the turning of the year, and recorded eclipses. Perhaps that is true. Yet the stones suggest more than science. Their placement feels less like calculation, more like devotion. The temple does not measure the sky. It reveres it. It does not master the stars. It listens. And in listening, it teaches us something deeper. That silence is its own form of knowledge. That wonder does not need answers to endure. At midnight, when the sky is thick with stars, the temple is transformed. Moonlight spills across the altars, scattering into patterns that mimic constellations. Shadows lengthen in strange ways, stretching like fingers toward the heavens. The air is so still that even breath feels like an intrusion. To stand there is to feel suspended, as if earth and sky have joined, and time itself has paused. Some say that if you stand within the central chamber and whisper your name, the echo rises not back to your ear, but upward, vanishing into the stars. Others believe the stars whisper in return, though their language is too vast for us to understand. Perhaps the whispers are not words at all, but light itself, eternal, unreachable, yet always present. It is said that in forgotten nights, pilgrims climbed the mountain to sit in the temple's silence. They carried no offerings but themselves. They lit no fires, sang no songs. They simply sat beneath the open roof, listening. Some returned saying they felt the sky listening back. Some said they dreamed of constellations reshaping themselves, guiding their lives in new directions. Others said nothing, carrying their silence like a gift. The temple asks nothing but presence. It does not promise revelation. It offers only a place to gaze upward, to breathe with the stars, to feel the vastness without fear. Perhaps that is why it endures, long after the priests, long after the chants, long after the names of those who built it have dissolved into dust. Now, the temple lies mostly forgotten. Its walls are worn, its carvings faint. Moss grows along its edges, and the mountain winds sweep through its open roof. And yet, when night comes, when the stars scatter themselves across the heavens, the temple awakens again. It needs no worshippers. It needs no rituals. The stars are enough. The silence is enough. And so the chapter fades. The temple remains in darkness, its whispers rising upward, unanswered yet eternal. Perhaps it was never meant to receive answers. Perhaps it was only meant to remind us that wonder itself is sacred, that to listen is sometimes more holy than to know. Perhaps the stars still wait, watching. Perhaps the temple still whispers, though its voice is softer now, carried by wind, marked by the moon. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so we leave the mountain pass. The stars gleam above. The temple sleeps below. And silence, vast, sacred, infinite, keeps its watch. It is said that beneath the echo of prayers, beneath the ringing of bells and the chant of voices, there lies another silence. It is a silence hidden deep below the cathedral floor, behind doors that no one has opened for centuries. To walk across the marble above it is to tread upon secrets, though few ever pause to wonder what rests beneath their feet. The story begins with faint candlelight flickering against stone steps. Shadows stretch downward, trembling along walls that have known both blessing and fear. The air grows cooler as one descends, carrying with it the scent of wax, of earth, of something long sealed away. Beneath the grand arches of the cathedral, where hymns rise like incense, a hidden stair curves into darkness. At its end, there is a wall smooth, unbroken, yet marked by whispers of a door. Whispers tell us that monks once carried manuscripts down these very steps. Forbidden texts, sealed in cloth, words too dangerous or too sacred for daylight. Some say they were books of heresy, visions that threatened the order of faith. Others claim they were prophecies, words not yet meant to be spoken. Still others believe they were memories, chronicles of worlds erased, truths rewritten, stories silenced. The monks lowered them into the chamber and locked them behind stone, where no eye could follow. It is said that on certain nights, when the cathedral above was empty, faint sounds could be heard through the floor. Not voices, not chants, but the hush of pages turning, as though the manuscripts themselves refused to remain quiet. Those who lingered too long claimed they felt vibrations beneath their knees, like the breath of hidden knowledge pressing upward. The faithful called it imagination. The monks called it caution. Yet the chamber remained sealed. Beneath the silence, shelves are said to wait. Wooden beams that have long since crumbled into dust, but still hold boxes. Boxes sealed with wax, tied with cords, marked with symbols no longer understood. Perhaps they contain letters, perhaps maps, perhaps words that were meant to undo worlds. No one can say. The chamber breathes in secrecy, not in revelation. Some believe that the chamber was created not to preserve, but to bury. That what rests inside was never meant to be read again. That the very act of hiding it was the ritual, the sealing of words as a kind of prayer against their return. Others say the opposite, that the chamber was built as a vault of memory, a place to wait until the right time. That the manuscripts were not destroyed because their voices were not finished, only paused, waiting, as silence waits, patient as dust. Imagine the monks as they carried the texts, robes brushing the marble, faces dimly lit by candle flame, hands trembling as they held the weight of parchment. Each step downward must have felt like a crossing, from the world of light into the world of shadow. Did they whisper as they descended? Did they pray for forgiveness or for protection? And when the door closed behind them, did they believe the words were truly sealed, or did they feel the silence press heavier against their hearts? Whispers tell us of a single manuscript that glowed faintly in the dark, ink shimmering as though marked by the moon. Others spoke of a scroll that carried a spiral of symbols, a code no one could break, though it seemed to breathe when unrolled. Another rumor tells of a prophecy, describing a time when the chamber would open again, not by hand, but by silence itself, when the world was ready to listen. The cathedral above still stands. Its bells still ring. Its windows still glow with colored light. Its floor still echoes with prayers. Few think of the ground beneath them, of the sealed chamber that waits in shadow. And yet, some say that if you kneel long enough in the nave, if you press your ear against the marble, you can hear a faint murmur, like a whisper through walls, like words folded into silence but not erased. What truths were buried there? Was it memory, heresy, or prophecy? Was it wisdom too fragile to survive in daylight, or lies too dangerous to leave unguarded? We cannot know. The chamber remains sealed, its silence heavier than answers. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the words inside still breathe, waiting for the world to soften enough to hear them. Or perhaps they have long since dissolved, Parchment turned to dust. Ink faded into nothing, leaving only the weight of secrecy itself. And so the story fades. Candlelight trembles, shadows stretch, and the sealed door remains unbroken. The manuscripts rest unseen, their silence pressing outward, like breath against stone. Above, prayers continue. Below, silence waits. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Until then, the chamber sleeps. It is said that beyond the last tamarisk, where caravan bells grow faint and the sky loosens into unmarked blue, the desert begins to remember. Dunes undulate like a slow ocean, their ridges catching light as if wearing a crown of fire at dawn, a veil of silver at night. Here, sand behaves like breath, gathering, pausing, sighing forward, until shapes appear and vanish in a lingering rhythm older than maps. Some believe that if you stand very still at the edge of this ever-changing sea, you can hear stone turning into dust, and dust whispering the names of kings no book recalls. The story opens with dunes moving like waves, a procession of golden spirals rolling toward the horizon. There is no fixed path, only the suggestion of one. No fixed landmark, only a memory of walls that once resisted the wind. For a moment, an arch rises out of light and shadow, the curve of a gate, the fragment of a tower. The image holds, then loosens. Sand streams down like water from a broken jar. The arch returns to the sea of grains. Silence gathers again, soft and absolute. Whispers tell us that a kingdom once rested here, marked by the moon and guarded by the stars. Gardens were said to bloom behind sun-bleached walls, watered by secret springs that rose at night and sank at dawn, as if the earth itself was breathing. In those gardens, figs swelled with dusk, pomegranates glowed like coals, and the scent of myrtle threaded the courtyards. Voices carried across the desert like music. Lullabies for infants, bargaining songs for merchants, prayers lifted at twilight when the sky became a bowl of copper. Yet the wind devoured their paths, and time erased their names. It is said that even the camels forgot the way. Beyond the silence, the sand keeps a delicate archive. If you walk at first light, when shadows lie long and the surface is cool, you may find the faintest geometry. A square corner under a drift, the round lip of a broken cistern, the ridged spine of a fallen column. Each fragment is an echo, a paused sentence. Some travelers swear they found a stairway whose steps descended into pure brightness, ending at a door sealed by glittering crystals of salt. Others describe a pool, no larger than a hand, reflecting a lattice of palm leaves where no palm grows. In the heat of noon, the signs dissolve. By evening they are elsewhere or nowhere, as if the desert had moved them in its sleep. In forgotten corners of musty archives, a few lines survive, letters written by merchants to distant sons. We arrived at the city of the spring that hides. The water rises from stone as if breathed by a god. And from a monk passing through the frontier, we were welcomed with dates and milk. Their walls are low, but their songs are high. After those lines, silence. The next letters speak of other roads, other markets. The kingdom slips out of the script like a star that has drifted beyond the window's frame. Some believe the kingdom fell to war, others to thirst. A few say it never stood at all, that what the travelers saw were mirages shaped by longing. The eye making shelter where none exists, the ear making songs out of wind. And yet, when the moon is thin and the air is cold, the desert bears a different testimony. If you listen, there is a tone beneath the hush, like a glass struck once long ago still humming in the dark. It is said that the spring at the city's heart flowed from a fissure in the rock, a narrow mouth where water came star-marked, tasting of stone and night. Priests tended the well as though tending a flame. They lowered clay jars tied with braided cords, and when they raised them gleaming, they poured the first cup back into the earth. The second cup was for strangers. The third they drank in silence. Perhaps gratitude kept the spring alive. Perhaps ritual gave it breath. When the priests were gone, the spring learned another language, the tongue of absence, and slowly sealed itself with salt. Beneath the silence, stories continue to gather. A woman from the northern caravans told of a mural, half-sunk, painted with boats like silver leaves sailing across a desert sky. We travel by stars. The mural seemed to say, not water. A herdsman wandering too far from his flock described a doorway adorned with copper studs, warm to the touch though the air was cold, and from within, a draught that smelled faintly of figs and dust. Another, delirious with heat, swore he heard the soft knocking of a loom, as if a weaver were still at work behind a curtain of sand, stitching patterns for a festival that would never arrive. These are fragments. They contradict one another gently, like waves lapping out of unison, and yet together they form a rhythm, uncertain, repetitive, true to the desert's breath. Where memory fades, the wind writes. It drags a long finger along the surface, composing and erasing, erasing and composing. If you kneel and let the grains run through your hands, you may feel a faint coolness within the warmth, as if a buried wall is catching the light from below. You may draw a line, mark a spiral, lay a small altar of pebbles, and by nightfall your work will be gone, folded into another pattern. It is not a cruelty. It is the oldest ceremony the desert knows, to make and unmake, to reveal and veil. Some voices say the kingdom learned this ceremony too well. They built low so as not to offend the horizon. They sang softly so as not to wake the wind. They wrote their laws on polished stone that could be washed with sand. They lived as if already half vanished, but vanishing is not survival. A generation came that lifted towers higher, called the wind by other names, and drew straight roads across the dunes. The wind answered with a long, patient hand. Towers became cairns. Roads became ripples. The straight line learned to bend. It is tempting to ask for the exact dates, rulers, treaties, the number of wells, the measure of the wall. But the desert prefers the approximate, and the heart, at night, agrees. So let us walk instead by starlight, guided by the soft grammar of constellations. Marked by the moon, a ridge gleams like a blade turned flat. In its lee, the air stills, and there, half revealed, a lintel carries a relief, 2 gazelles, a palm, a curve of script unlike any we know. You brush away the grains. The letters resist. They are not a message. They are a breath. The wind returns and fills the carved grooves as gently as a mother covering a sleeping child. If the kingdom was real, then someone loved here. Someone learned to read the sky to guess the weather. Someone mended sandals by a doorway at dusk while dates cooled in water. Someone taught a child to count the bright stars of the scorpion and the faint ones of the fish. Someone brewed tea so slowly that the fragrance became a clock. It is not the names of kings the desert keeps. It is the temperature of evenings, the angle of a shadow, the way a lullaby continues after the child has slept. Perhaps that is a better chronicle than ledgers of tribute or the weight of grain. There is a tale of a man who tried to map the buried streets. He carried pegs and rope and a curious faith. At sunrise, he measured the distance between a column and an edge of brick. At midday, the column shifted. By evening, the brick had learned another shape. On the 7th day, he set his tools down and drew the city with his eyes closed, letting his hand follow the wind. The map he made is kept in a monastery far away. It looks nothing like a city. It looks like the inside of a shell. Spirals upon spirals, a soft echo in ink. Beneath the dunes, it is said, a single chamber remains intact. For walls, a low bench, a niche turned toward the place where the morning star rises. No treasure lies within. On the floor, only a circle of pebbles, a thread of dried myrtle, a shard of painted bowl. And yet those who have found it report a feeling that does not pass quickly, the sense that the room is waiting for someone to finish a sentence begun long ago. Perhaps the kingdom knew that the smallest rooms are the last to leave. Perhaps they built this one not to be found, but to be felt. By late evening, when the heat withdraws like a tide and the moon lifts its pale lid, the desert becomes a book written in silver and charcoal. The wind softens. The dunes hold their breath. Across that quiet, a sound arises, the faintest ring, like metal cooled with water. Bells that once called the city to prayer, or simply grains striking one another in a chill that sharpens the ear. The mind leans toward meaning. The desert offers echo. You stand between them, unsure, comforted. Some believe the kingdom was a mirage and nothing else, a longing given shape by thirst. Others believe it flourished for centuries and then folded itself into legend with the grace of a dancer leaving the stage. Perhaps these beliefs are not opposed. Perhaps the truest cities are both. Fathers and mothers and children and markets and springs, and also the mirage that remains when all the rest is gone. The heart keeps what the hand cannot. As we prepare to leave, the dunes shift again. The suggestion of a gate rises, poised like a question. For a breath-long span, two towers balance the sky. You think you see an inscription above the opening. A curve, a dot, a small star carved at the margin. Then the wind moves and the towers travel a finger-width south, and the gate is a slope, and the inscription is a ripple, and the star is the star itself, steady above us, older than walls. Perhaps the kingdom was never meant to be found. Perhaps its gift is the way it loosens our need to arrive. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and the desert is generous with echoes. It lends them, then takes them back, teaches us to hold softly, and so the chapter settles. Night covers the sand with a blue so deep it feels oceanic. The cold rises from below, tender and pure. Somewhere, a fox writes cursive in the surface, then erases its own script. Somewhere, beneath a ridge, a shard of glazed bowl keeps the last of the day's warmth like a secret. The wind moves without hurry, carrying a breath that might have begun centuries ago. Either the kingdom was real or it was the desert's mirage. Either way, its silence still breathes with the wind. And if you lie down now, head on your arm listening, you may feel the fine grains collect at your ear, like words assembling at the threshold of sleep. Ancient, veiled, crumbled, star-marked, ready to cross into the dream that will finish what the day could not say. It is said that in forgotten nights, when the air was still and the earth lay quiet, people raised their eyes and saw not constellations, but words. Stars were not scattered points of light, but letters written across a celestial page. Each glimmer carried a sound. Each pattern whispered a story. Each silence between them held meaning deeper than breath. To look at the sky was to read, though the language was not our own. The story begins with the image of a night sky shimmering in sacred silence. The horizon darkens, and the first stars appear faint as dust. Then more rise, until the heavens open into a vast manuscript of light. The constellations we name now, the scorpion, the archer, the lion, were not always seen this way. Ancient astronomers believed the heavens carried codes, messages veiled in spirals, warnings hidden in alignments, truths recorded in light so distant it seemed eternal. Some carved these codes into stone, circles of standing pillars, aligned with the solstice, spirals etched into cave walls, marked by the moon, tablets pressed with signs of stars, each one a symbol, each symbol a prayer. These were not maps of geography but of time. To trace the stars was to trace destiny itself, as though the heavens were a mirror reflecting what Earth had not yet lived. Whispers tell us of a people who believed the stars carried memory. Each new star that appeared was said to be the soul of a voice that had passed. Each cluster was a family reunited, shining together beyond the veil. In this belief, to read the stars was not to seek the future, but to remember the past. Not a past of wars and kings, but of breath, of love, of voices marked by silence. Perhaps the codes were never meant to predict, but to remind. Beneath the silence of the sky, stories gathered. Some saw warnings, alignments that foretold floods, eclipses that whispered of famine, spirals that hinted at collapse. Others saw invitations, pathways to kingdoms hidden beyond the horizon, codes to guide travelers by night across deserts and seas. Still others saw the stars as divine letters, written by gods whose voices were too vast for speech. Whatever the reading, one truth remained. The stars carried something more than light. Imagine a scribe at dusk, seated upon a hill, tablet resting upon their knees. They traced the rising stars with a stylus, carving lines into clay. To the unknowing, it is random, meaningless. But to the scribe, each mark is a syllable, each syllable a fragment of a greater hymn. When the tablet hardens, it becomes more than record. It becomes a prayer, a reflection of the sky's secret breath. It is said that whole libraries once existed, filled not with words of men, but with codes of stars. Shelves stacked with clay tablets, stone circles aligned across valleys, scrolls written with constellations instead of letters. Some of these may still sleep beneath sand or soil. Others were burned, their meaning rising like smoke into the sky that birthed them. But even erased, their presence lingers, for the stars themselves remain. Some believe the codes were maps leading to kingdoms lost, that by following certain alignments, one might reach cities of stone where rivers vanish underground, or temples where gods still wait in shadow. Others claim they were warnings, given not once but forever. Signs repeated in cycles, telling of disasters humanity never learned to avoid. Still others whisper they were neither map nor warning, but conversation. The heavens speaking in light, the earth replying in silence. Beneath the starlit sky, one begins to feel the uncertainty. Each constellation offers a question rather than an answer. Each alignment feels like a riddle, unresolved. Perhaps that was always the point, for codes that can be broken end in silence, but codes that remain hidden keep wonder alive. And so the listener is invited to gaze upward. Imagine lying upon the earth, spine to soil, eyes to stars. The night is cool, the silence vast. Above, the sky unfolds, glittering, veiled, infinite. You trace lines between stars with your eyes, forming shapes that shift, dissolve, reform. Are you drawing the archer or the hunter or something unnamed? Perhaps you are drawing a word that no language remembers. Perhaps you are not drawing at all, but listening. It is said that the stars answer only when silence is deep enough, that their voices are not sound, but presence, that the codes they carry are less about knowing, more about feeling, the sensation of being part of something vast, ancient, and unfinished. Some voices say the codes were never meant for us, that they were written for other eyes, other beings, long before we learned to look upward. Others say the codes are for everyone, always eternal, the same message, repeated until we learn to hear it. Perhaps both are true. Where memory fades, the stars remain. Where cities crumble, the constellations still rise. Where names are forgotten, the codes continue, written not in parchment but in light, not for centuries but for millennia. As the night deepens, the stars grow sharper. The silence becomes heavier, almost oceanic, pressing against the ears. In that silence, the heavens breathe. You may feel as though the stars are waiting, patient, endless, willing to hold their codes until the day we are ready to listen. Perhaps the codes are maps to kingdoms we will never see. Perhaps they are warnings of cycles we will always repeat. Perhaps they are neither, and only reminders that wonder itself is sacred, that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be kept, and so the chapter fades. The stars gleam on, silent, unresolved. The sky remains a page, vast and veiled, letters scattered beyond comprehension. The codes lie hidden still, carried in constellations, carried in silence, carried in light that left its source long before we were born. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the stars will always whisper in a language just beyond our reach. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so we leave the night, eyes closing, the sky folding into dream. The codes remain infinite, eternal, unbroken. It is said there was once a library whose memory is a flame. Not a flame that warms, but a flame that consumes. Its name drifts through history like smoke, visible for a moment, then lost in the wind. Some call it Alexandria, some Babylon, some another place entirely, erased so thoroughly that only its burning remains. Whatever its name, its presence is whispered in fragments, as though the world itself cannot bear to speak of it whole. The story begins with the scent of smoke. Imagine it. Parchment curling inward, ink softening into black threads, words breaking apart as they rise. Flames leap along the shelves, devouring thought faster than breath can carry. Sparks climb upward into night, scattering like stars undone. Each page that falls to ash carries more than letters. It carries memory, wisdom, prayer, the hush of voices long dead. To watch it burn is to watch silence claim what once was living speech. But this library burned twice. Once by conquest, when armies marched and torches were thrown, when scrolls crackled like dry leaves under fire, and once by silence, when memory chose to forget, when centuries looked away, leaving only faint whispers. What the first fire destroyed, the second fire concealed. Between them both, the library dissolved into dust and myth, and yet some claim it never died. They say its texts were carried into vaults, hidden by scribes who refused to let words vanish entirely, that fragments were tucked inside monasteries, buried beneath sand, carved into stone tablets that still sleep beneath ruins, that the library exists not in one place, but scattered like embers across the world, waiting to be gathered again. Whispers tell us that within its walls were the wisdom of vanished empires, books written in tongues now silent, scrolls filled with the songs of faiths forgotten, chronicles of civilizations erased before their names reached our ears. Some describe machines drawn in ink, inventions centuries before their time. Others imagine maps stretching across oceans no one had yet sailed, stories of stars not yet charted, codes of numbers that spiraled toward the infinite. To read its shelves, they say, was to walk not into the past, but into eternity. But eternity has a price. Flames rose, pages fell, and silence followed. In forgotten chronicles, faint traces remain. A Roman historian writes of a fire that devoured 1,000 scrolls. An Arab traveler speaks of manuscripts thrown into baths to heat water, their ashes turning steam into ghostly prayers. A monk in Europe describes a vault emptied in haste, words fleeing into exile. Yet these accounts do not agree. Each voice names a different conqueror, a different fire, a different year. The truth bends like smoke, refusing to settle. Perhaps this is the second fire, the fire of silence, of forgetting, of uncertainty. It is said that when the first flames rose, scribes wept not for the loss of knowledge, but for the loss of voices. For each manuscript was not only words on parchment, it was the breath of its writer, the rhythm of their hand, the echo of their heart. To lose it was to lose not only thought but presence. And so the fire was not only destruction, but erasure. Yet still the question lingers. Did the library truly end? Some voices say no, that its scrolls wander still, hidden beneath the dust of monasteries, concealed in caves sealed with wax, veiled inside vaults marked by silence. That to this day, somewhere fragments remain, waiting for the moment when eyes are ready to read again. Imagine walking into the ruins where it once stood. Stones broken, foundations veiled in sand. You lift a piece of charred parchment from the ground, its letters half erased, its meaning fractured. As you touch it, the ash crumbles. The word vanishes before your eyes. Yet in that vanishing, something lingers. The sense of a sentence unfinished, of thought cut short, of memory refusing to die. Perhaps this is the true library. Not the walls, not the shelves, not even the manuscripts themselves. Perhaps the true library is the silence it left behind. The questions that refuse to be answered. The wonder that persists, even when the words are gone. Whispers tell us that on certain nights, in the ruins of its shadow, one can still hear the faint crackle of pages, the low hum of voices chanting as they copy texts by candlelight. Some claim the smell of smoke lingers in the stones, as though the fire never truly ended. Others speak of dreams in which they wander endless halls, shelves rising higher than sight, scrolls stretching beyond reach. In those dreams, they begin to read, but the words dissolve, curling into flame, leaving only the warmth of meaning without form. What was lost? Was it memory, heresy, prophecy? Was it knowledge we were not meant to hold, or wisdom we were not ready to keep? No one can say. The fire still smolders. The shelves still echo. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the library's gift was not its texts, but its silence. The way it reminds us that knowledge is fragile, that memory can vanish, that wonder endures even when words do not. And so the chapter fades. Smoke drifts upward, soft and endless. Pages curl into ash. The night sky receives their prayers, and the listener is left not with answers, but with the silence of words that cannot be read again. It is said that on a windswept hill, where the earth rises like a slow breath above the plain, there rests a single stone. It is older than the village that now sleeps at the hill's base, older than the road that winds past it, older even than the fields that unfold in its shadow. To stand before it is to feel the weight of centuries pressing softly against the air. By day, it looks unremarkable, just another boulder weathered by wind and rain. But by night, when the moonlight falls across its surface, its face awakens. Lines etched deeper than memory glow faintly in silver, spirals, grooves, and shapes that seem to shift with every glance. The story begins in this pale light. The wind curls around the stone, carrying the hush of grass bending against the hill. The silence is not empty, it is listening. Some villagers say that if you place your ear close to the carvings, you will hear it breathe. A soft hum, like the echo of a voice buried too deep to rise, yet unwilling to vanish. Local legends tell us that the stone speaks when night is quiet. Not always, not for everyone, but for those who come in stillness, carrying more questions than words. The grooves, they say, form letters of a forgotten tongue. When the moon is marked by clouds, the letters vanish into shadow. When the moon is full, they shimmer, almost forming words, almost arranging themselves into sentences. Some claim to have heard a whisper, faint as dust. Others speak of dreams that follow, dreams filled with voices not their own, voices that seem to belong to the stone itself. Scholars dismiss it. They call the grooves erosion, marks carved by rain, cracks widened by centuries of frost. They measure, record, and leave. Yet those who linger, those who touch the surface with bare hands, speak of something heavier than erosion. They say the stone feels alive. Not alive as a body breathes, but alive as silence breathes, present, attentive, waiting. Whispers tell us of pilgrims who climbed the hill in centuries past, seeking meaning in the stone's face. Some pressed their foreheads to it, praying for answers. Some traced the grooves with their fingers, believing the patterns carried codes written by the stars. A wanderer once left a small scroll at its base, tied with cord, believing the stone could read. The scroll dissolved in rain, but the wanderer swore he later heard his own words whispered back to him in a dream. Others came only to listen. They sat at the stone's side, hour after hour, night after night, until silence filled them. Some left with nothing but calm, others with visions they could not explain. In forgotten manuscripts, a monk describes the stone as a witness older than our prayers, whose voice is the wind itself. A farmer's diary, centuries later, records a night when the stone sighed beneath the moon, and I knew it remembered what we had forgotten. What was the stone? Was it a relic of a vanished temple, the last marker of a sacred path? Was it placed here by hands that read the stars, aligning it with constellations now shifted in the sky? Or was it simply earth lifted by chance, shaped by weather into patterns we long to understand? Perhaps the truth lies between. For the stone holds more than form, it holds presence. To stand before it is to feel watched, though not in judgment. The stone listens. It listens to footsteps, to whispers, to silence itself. It listens as centuries pass, villages rise, and generations walk the hill without noticing. It listens as prayers are spoken and forgotten. It listens when no one comes at all. Some say the stone carries a voice, but not a voice we can hear. They say its grooves are not words, but breath. That the patterns etched upon it are not meant to be read, but felt. That if you close your eyes, rest your hand upon its face, and breathe slowly, you will find the silence speaking within you. Not answers, but echoes. Not knowledge, but stillness. In forgotten corners of folklore, there are stories of the stone guiding travelers. One tale tells of a shepherd who lost his flock in the mist. He sat against the stone, weeping softly. When he rose, he heard faint bells through the fog, leading him back to his sheep. Another story speaks of a child who vanished on the hill, only to return at dawn saying she had followed the voice in the rock. These tales are not proof. They are whispers, spirals of memory, threads of wonder passed through generations. Yet they linger as all sacred stories do. Scholars may insist it is nothing, yet silence carries its own authority. And the silence of this stone is not empty, presses outward, as though something waits inside. Perhaps the stone was carved by forgotten astronomers, aligning its spirals with the moon, its grooves with the rising of certain stars. Perhaps it was once part of a circle, its companions now buried or broken, leaving only this one voice standing. Or perhaps it was never carved at all. Perhaps the wind itself inscribed it, the way the sea writes on shells, the way time leaves its codes in dust. Beneath the silence, the stone continues. Centuries have touched it, rains have washed it, storms have battered it, yet it remains. Villages have changed, names forgotten, fields abandoned, roads rebuilt. The stone does not change. It listens, it breathes, it waits. As the chapter closes, the moonlight fades. Shadows lengthen across the hill. The grooves soften, vanishing into darkness. The stone remains, mute yet breathing, its voice pressed into silence. Perhaps it was never meant to speak in words. Perhaps its voice is the silence itself, waiting for us to listen. Some voices only echo when we are ready. And so the hill sleeps, the village sleeps. The stone watches as it always has, as it always will. Silent, patient, eternal. It is said that far beyond the reach of shore, where the water deepens into shadow and sunlight can no longer enter, a procession of kings still rests. Not in tombs of stone nor chambers of earth, but in the depth of waters that guard them with silence more complete than any vault. There, beneath layers of salt and centuries, lies a kingdom not of the living, but of memory, watched, held, and veiled by the ocean itself. The story begins at the edge of tide and rock. Waves climb against cliffs, then fall away again, pulling with them the hushed breath of secrets. In caverns carved by endless water, the sea speaks softly, groans, sighs, echoes that sound almost like voices. Some who linger at these cliffs claim they hear more than water. They say the ocean carries whispers into its caves, as though telling fragments of a story it refuses to fully reveal. Divers who have braved the coastal depths tell of shapes blurred beneath the waves. Not reefs, not rocks, but thrones. Crowns scattered like shells upon the ocean floor. Long lines of carved stone that seem even too deliberate to be natural. Some describe vast staircases leading downward, vanishing into blue shadow. Others speak of pillars encrusted with coral, still rising like sentinels from sand that never sees light. None can agree on detail. All agree on one thing, the feeling. To look upon these shapes is to feel watched. To feel as though the sea itself is guarding something sacred, something never meant for the eyes of air. Whispers tell us that these kings were not taken by the ocean, but given to it. That rulers once demanded to be hidden forever, their reigns ending not with burial beneath earth, but with descent beneath waves. Priests led processions to the shore, carrying crowns, banners, and stone effigies, and the ocean opened to receive them. Some say bodies were lowered in ships that burned as they sank. Others claim no flesh was ever buried, only symbols, thrones carved from rock, masks of gold and bronze, set into the sea as offerings, as guardians of a kingdom that would never rise again. It is also said that the ocean did not merely receive but choose. Storms came in nights of thunder, and whole courts vanished. Castles fell, their stones tumbled into the waves. The ocean took kings not by ritual, but by will. Those rulers who tried to stand higher than the tide, who built too near its reach, were carried away in a single breath. To this day, fishermen claim to hear bells beneath their boats, ringing through currents, as if from towers still standing on the seabed. Beneath the silence of the deep, memory dissolves into salt. Scrolls and cloths and bone are gone. What remains is stone, thrones draped in kelp, columns painted in coral, steps where fish drift like priests, processing in endless circles. Some divers swear they have touched crowns fused with barnacles, their edges softened by centuries, yet still bearing the weight of shape. They return to the surface silent, unable to speak of what they felt. For the deeper they went, the more the water seemed to close not only around their bodies, but around their thoughts. In forgotten chronicles, faint traces emerge. An ancient mariner writes of palaces drowned where rulers sleep. A poet describes kings whose voices are waves. Later, a monk records a coastal legend. The sea holds the throne of every age, guarding what the earth has lost. These fragments do not agree, yet together they echo the same truth, that the ocean keeps what time cannot. What would it mean for kings to rest beneath water? Were they hidden in humility, dissolving into silence? Or were they entombed in pride, demanding eternity from a power greater than themselves? Some believe the ocean guards them until the stars align, when their voices will rise again through the tide. Others whisper that their silence is their punishment, that the sea muffled them so their words could no longer shape the world. Imagine descending into the blue. At first, light lingers, silver, wavering. Fish scatter like fragments of thought. Then the water thickens into green, then black. The sound of your breath grows louder than your heartbeat, and there shapes emerge. A staircase leading down where no foot could climb. A hall of pillars, their tops vanishing into the shadow above. A throne, tilted slightly, its arm wrapped in coral like ivy. It does not seem abandoned. It seems asleep. Perhaps the kings are not gone. Perhaps the ocean cradles them in suspension, their presence still breathing through currents. Perhaps the salt preserves more than stone. Some divers swear they felt a hand press against theirs in the dark, soft as water, firm as memory. Others dream afterward of voices echoing in languages they do not know. The dreams linger like tides, pulling them back again and again, though they dare not return to the depths. What truths were buried there? Was it memory, heresy, or prophecy? Was it the arrogance of rulers who demanded the sea carry their crowns? Or was it the ocean itself, writing its own history with waves, erasing what land tried to preserve? As night deepens, the sea grows darker still. Waves strike the cliffs in a rhythm older than words. In that rhythm, there is a suggestion, like drums of processions long gone, like the steps of kings walking into shadow. Some say the ocean is not only keeper but mourner, singing endlessly for those it holds. Others say it is not mourning at all, but silence, refusing to yield what it has taken. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the ocean's gift is not revelation, but wonder, the reminder that some histories are kept in silence, that some voices belong to depths no eye can see. And so the chapter fades. The tide rises, pulling softly against the rocks. Foam gathers, then dissolves. The night sea breathes in and out, guarding its procession. The kings remain, resting in darkness, their thrones untouched, their crowns veiled. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Until then, the ocean keeps them, silent, patient, eternal. It is said that in the heart of a ruined city, where arches have fallen and walls lean like weary travelers, there rests a device of stone and bronze. It stands alone among the rubble, too deliberate to be accident, too silent to be alive. Its face is marked with wheels that no longer turn, arms that no longer move, grooves that no hand remembers how to read. Some call it a clock, others a calendar. Still others whisper that it was never meant to measure time at all, but something more elusive, something hidden, something eternal. The story begins with the faint clink of metal against wind. As the night air drifts through the city's broken colonnades, the bronze edges of the device shift slightly, tapping like a soft chime. The sound is not constant. It comes and goes, fragile as a breath. Yet in the silence of the ruins, it carries far. The wheels remain unmoving, rusted in place, but aligned as though waiting. Their teeth interlock with precision, even in stillness, even in centuries of decay. Once this city thrived. Its streets were paved with marble. Its fountains sang with water drawn from secret channels. Its plazas filled with voices rising like incense. Somewhere among its temples and halls, this device was built. Not for beauty alone, but for purpose. Priests may have gathered around it, reading the positions of its hands. Scholars may have recorded its alignments on scrolls. Rulers may have trusted its face to tell them when to plant, when to wage war, when to pray. And yet, its true intent slips away, hidden as the city itself slipped into dust. Some say it was a clock, built to count the passing of hours. Yet the hours it measured were not like ours. They did not belong to the ticking of minutes or the turning of modern dials. They belonged to the rhythm of stars, to the slow breath of seasons, to the deep spiral of ages. Perhaps its hands moved once for every solstice, or turned only when eclipses marked the sky. Perhaps it counted not time as we know it, but moments where heaven touched earth, where silence rippled through the centuries. Others believe it was a calendar, a device meant to guard memory. Each gear a season, each wheel a year, each turn a cycle of birth and return. To stand before it was not to ask what hour it was, but what age. Not when to wake, but when to remember. If this was true, then perhaps the machine did not stop. Perhaps it finished its cycle, marking an end we do not yet understand, an ending we still live inside. Still others whisper of another purpose, more veiled, more sacred. They say it was not built to mark time at all, but to measure eternity. That its stillness now is not failure, but fulfillment. That it waits, aligned, unmoving, until silence deep enough awakens it. That it listens to hours not yet born, counting in measures too vast for us to hear. If so, its hands are not still. They are simply moving in rhythms we cannot follow, rhythms slower than stars, rhythms older than oceans. In forgotten manuscripts, faint echoes appear. A traveler writes of a wheel of bronze, teeth sharp as the moon, standing where prayers are held. A monk describes a device of circles within circles, speaking without voice. An astronomer, centuries later, wonders at a mechanism left by gods, turning once when lifetimes are gone. None agree. Each voice bends toward mystery, and yet the device endures. The stone face remains upright. Its bronze arms, though weathered, still reach outward. Dust gathers in its grooves, but the pattern is unbroken. To look upon it is to feel a question pressing against the silence. What did it measure? What hours did it count? Why did it stop? Perhaps it was never meant to stop. Perhaps it has not. Imagine standing before it under moonlight. The city is silent. The arches lie collapsed, the fountains dry, the plazas empty. Only the device remains. You place your hand upon its bronze. It is cold yet steady. You trace the grooves of the wheel, feel the teeth worn smooth by time. For a moment, it seems to hum beneath your fingers, faint as an echo. Perhaps the wheels are still moving, only too slowly for flesh to know. Perhaps the machine is alive, but in silence, in secrecy, in rhythms that stretch beyond our years. Some pilgrims say they dreamed of the device turning. In their visions, the wheels shifted once, slowly, like the breath of a mountain. And when it turned, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as though listening. They woke with the certainty that the machine did not measure hours at all. It measured presence. The moments where silence deepens, where memory sharpens, where the eternal bends toward the mortal. What truths were buried here? Was it a clock? A calendar? A guardian of secrets too fragile for words? Or was it only stone and bronze, shaped by hands that wished to listen to the silence of time? It is said that when the city fell, the device did not crumble. Flames consumed the halls, invaders shattered statues, roofs collapsed into dust, but the machine remained. Its bronze gleamed through the smoke. Its stone face endured beneath the ash. Even ruin could not erase it. Some believe this is proof of its purpose, that it was not built to be broken, but to remain patient, silent, eternal. Perhaps it was never meant to measure hours at all. Perhaps it was built to remind us that time itself is fragile, that memory can dissolve, that silence is the only measure that endures. And so the chapter fades. The city sleeps in rubble. The device stands alone, its wheels unmoving, its hands forever still. Yet in its stillness, something waits, something listens. Perhaps the machine has not stopped. Perhaps its silence is its measure. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Until then, the clock remains, silent, patient, eternal.